Hello students, good morning. So already we have started the second lesson, that is the visit to the mansion. So in the previous class I said you that Joe has came to Mr. Lorry, and while they had a talk and a chit chat. Okay, so in the meanwhile she said about their family that she had three sisters like Bet, Meg, and Amy. Okay, so they have started talking, and in the meanwhile, when Laurie what he said that I used to hear you are talking to each other. Sometimes I see all the members you are sitting around the table with your mother. Okay, like it just was like looking at a picture. Okay, with that Joe was touched. Okay, what's the meaning of touched here? Felt sorry for him because why she felt sorry? Because he was alone at home, no? So, while he was unwell and lonely, she was happy at home with her mother and sisters. Okay, when she was thinking that Mr. Lorry was alone at his home, okay, and she was happily enjoying her life with the mother and the sisters. Okay, you could just come and visit us, said gently. Then what Joe said, you could visit us. So now we are both our friends, no? So you can come to my home and you can visit us. So she said gently, Mother would be glad to welcome you, and you'll have two jolly times with my sisters and me. Won't your grandpa let you? So then, what she said, my mother will be very happy and she'll be very glad to welcome you. Okay, and we'll have the jolly times with my sisters and with me. Okay, and what she said, won't your grandpa let you? Okay, so she's asking, won't your grandpa will let you to come to my house? So then, I think he would if I asked. What he said, if I ask my grandpa, he will let me go. Okay, he's very kind, but he thinks I might disturb strangers, said Laurie. Okay, so he said that my grandpa will send me, but even though he's kind, he'll think that I might disturb the strangers. So then Joe said, we are not strangers, we are your neighbors, okay, and you won't disturb us. Then Joe and Laurie started talking about books. So these two guys are very fond of books. Okay, Joe was delighted to find that Laurie also loved books and had read more than her. Okay, these two guys are very interested in reading books. Okay, so they love books. If you like them so much, come down to our library. Laurie offered. Grandpa isn't home. Don't be afraid. So what he said? So he said to Joe and he said her to come to the down library because he is having a library in the home. If you like the books, come and join me. Okay, and what he is saying, Grandpa isn't home. Don't be afraid. Okay, I'm not afraid of anything, Joe replied, tossing her head. Okay, with moving her head, what she said, I'm not afraid of anything. Laurie laughed and led her through the rooms. He let her examine whatever struck her fancy. At last, they reached the library where Joe clapped her hands and danced with delight. Okay, so Laurie laughed at her and led her into the rooms. Okay, and he was showing her all the books, and he was said to her, whichever books you are interested in, you can see them. And he was very curious how Joe is going to pick up the book and what book she is going to read now. Okay, when they reached the library, Okay, so when they reached the library, Jo clapped her hands and danced with joy. It was lined with books, means the room was fully filled with many rows of books. And then there were pictures and statues, strange little tables of bronze pieces, and best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint tiles all around it. Okay, there was pretty old-fashioned books, monuments are there in that room. Okay, everything was very neat and clean in the room. So then, Laurie, she's saying that, what richness, sighed Joe, sinking into the chair and gazing around her. Theodore Lawrence, you should be the happiest boy in the world. Okay, so when what richness means how good the room was. So she had started sitting in the chair. Okay, and she has been looking all around. What, Laurie, you should be the happiest boy in the world. She was saying that. Then, no one can live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head as he perched on the table. Just then a bell rang and Joe flew up, alarmed. It's your grandpa, what shall I do? So, what happened then? No, Joe is saying that no one can live on the books. Means, by reading the books, you cannot stay for more than some time. He said that. And shaking his head as he perched, he was sitting on the table as you can see here. Okay. As shaking his head, he perched on a table. So just then the bell rang and Joe flew up. Okay, so in the meanwhile, what happened while they are having a talk? Suddenly the bell rang. Okay, Joe was flew up, means stood up fastly. Oh, she said that it's your grandpa. What shall I do now? Well, what if it is? You said you are not afraid of anything. Remember? Said Laurie, laughing. So what happened? In the meanwhile, she said that yeah, it's your grandpa. Then what Laurie is saying? You said that you are not afraid of anything. Did you remember? So he was saying by laughing. But it was only the doctor who had to come to check on Laurie. Okay, then Laurie, what he said? Laurie said that it was a doctor who came to check him. Would you mind if I left you for a minute? Laurie asked. What he did? He asked Joe, if I leave you for a minute, would you mind? So then Joe said, no. Okay, Mr. Lawrence. So Jo shook her head and went off to look at a portrait of old Mr. Lawrence. What she did? She was looking at the portrait. What's the meaning of portrait here? Portrait means a picture. As you can see that here, she's looking at a portrait of Mr. Old Lawrence. Okay, she was still standing before the portrait when the door opened again. Jo did not turn as she said, I won't be afraid of your grandpa. He looks stern, but he has kind eyes and like him. So what she said that she was still standing in front of the portrait and just then somebody opened the door. Just then the door was opened again. She didn't even turn around and she said that I won't be afraid of your grandpa. Okay, he looks stern, means He looked serious and strict outside, but he had kind eyes, she was saying to him, and I like him. Okay, then your grandpa looks stern. What's the meaning of stern here? Serious. Then, thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice behind her. And there, to Joe's great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence. What happened? Thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice. What's the meaning of gruff here? Rough and low voice behind her. And that was a great dismay. Okay, that something happens unexpectedly. So, and that was Joe's great dismay. Stood old Mr. Lawrence. That was Mr. Lawrence. When she had turned around, it was Laurie's grandfather. Later, an amused Mr. Lawrence invites Joe to tea. There, as Joe and Laurie talk merrily, Mr. Lawrence realizes how lonely Laurie had been and decides to send him to March House occasionally. What happened after some time? Mr. Lawrence had invited Joe for a tea and they will have a chit chat. In the meanwhile, Joe and Laurie talks happily. Okay, that Mr. Lawrence realizes that how lonely my grandson was, and he will give freedom to Mr. Laurie that you can visit March House occasionally. Okay, that was the end of the story. Okay, students, we'll meet in the next class.